Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Software Success. I'm Ashley Jones, and I will be showing you some things that you can do in your software from Dime today during this next 60-ish minutes or so. And so if you're new here, this is where we talk all things software. You can ask me questions if you want. I usually have a cute little design or some specific demonstration plan for you to show you how to use features in your software. I am a software lover. I could not live without it, and I really enjoy it. I love just the designing aspect of it before I ever even get to my embroidery machine. And I want all of you guys too. You paid probably quite a bit of money for any software that you own. So you should be able to use it. You should know how to use it. You should want to use it to make your life easier. And so that's my goal here is I want to make it easier for you, and I want you to love your software as much as I do. So we've got a fun event planned, and I'll share that with you in a bit. And so while we're waiting for everybody to join, we'll just say hi to everyone that's joining. If you haven't told me already, tell me over in the chat where you're viewing from. And so Laura, thank you for being here. Laura, I think you should get the award. I think you are always the first one here. It is so good to see you, and I always love to see that you are the first one and comment. So thank you so much for your loyalty and always attending this and other Dime presentations as well. So thank you so much. And then Julie Staffenhagen, thank you for being here from Wasso, Michigan. Thank you for being here, Julie. Good to see you. And Marianne, I've gotten used to seeing Marianne quite often too. And so thank you for being with us, Marianne. She says she's coming to us from Ohio. Paula Summers, thank you for being here from looks like Ladson, South Carolina. Thanks for being here. And my friend Eileen, thanks for being here. She says she's watching from her porch. Oh, and 84 degrees. That sounds wonderful in Maryland. Thank you for being here. Mary Larson, thank you so much for being here from Santa Fe. Charlie Wood from Texas, Granbury, Texas. Thanks for being here. That's not too far from our home office. Laurie Albrecht, you guys know Laurie. She's part of our education team here. She is very knowledgeable on our Dime software too. So Francie, thanks for being here from SoCal, she says. So Latanya EX from California, thank you so much for being here, Latanya. Marie, good to see you from France. And we also have Germany in the house. Thank you, Sigrid, for being here. Adirondacks, beautiful part of the country. If you guys haven't been there in upstate New York. Thanks, CJ, for being here from Washington. Kathy, another familiar Dime software user. Thank you so much for being here, Kathy Purdy. And my friend Bet from Phoenix. Bet, I do not want to hear any comments about your humidity in Arizona, because I bet you I have you beat here in Florida. We've been having so much rain, and it is just hot and steamy all the time. So this by Chris Embroidery. Thank you for being here from Middle Tennessee. Joanne Banco, thanks for joining. You guys probably saw me and Joanne on Facebook Live last week on Thursday. We had a fun show. I think that was last week. Boy, time is hard to keep up with. And Tammy, you guys know Tammy. She's also part of our education team, a software guru and expert all things Dime and embroidery. Barbara, thanks for being here as well. Okay, I think we've given everybody sufficient amount of time to jump in. I think that we have a good crew here. The numbers kind of stabilized out there. So I just like everybody to get time to get joined in so that they can see everything, and maybe we don't lose people because they didn't see the beginning. So today I'm back in Perfect Embroidery Pro, but I did something for you guys that I hope will make this easier. You guys know that I always say that the things that I'm showing in any of these software success, you may have the feature in your software, even if I'm not particularly using the features of another program. So today I chose Perfect Embroidery Pro for one of the features that is specifically included with Perfect Embroidery Pro, and that's the split design. We've gotten that question, it seems like recently, quite a bit about stitching in a hoop larger than what their machine allows. So I wanted to be able to show that. So that's why I chose Perfect Embroidery Pro. But this cute little design that I'm creating is actually using artwork tools and also text, TrueType TrueType, and I also did a little bit with the built-in text as well, and using different stitch types. So what I did, and I'll show you this after we, or maybe I'll show it before and after, but I made a list of the tools that I'm using, and then what software or those tools are in, so that you could maybe pick out the things that are in yours. And there's always, of course, ways around things and multiple ways to do things. I'm going to show you how to create this cute little design, the easiest and the fewest steps that I could think of, but certainly the way that I'm doing it is not the only way to do create this particular cute little design, but I thought it was cute for summer. So I made a list, and I'm going to try to make this list each time we do one of these from this point forward, because I may not be staying in one software. Last month in June, we saw how all of Dime software integrate and how they work together to really make your tool shed very powerful the more pieces that you own. And so I really don't want to specifically limit to one, because I want, no matter which piece you have that you're watching, you can take something away from this presentation. So I'm going to start working out this list here. I'm working on a comparison chart that I think will also help everyone as to what features are in what software. So that is something you'll see from Dime. We're trying to pretty it up right now and make it readable and make sense to everyone. But because I've made that list comparing our software, I have a better idea now too of what is in what software. I kind of knew it was kind of up here, but I wanted something definitive. So today we're going to be using the artwork tool, and the artwork tool is how you can draw a shape and then use it for your designing purposes. And we actually have that artwork tool in a lot of our software. So those are listed there. Those abbreviations are for the software name. So Perfect Embroidery Pro, My Quilt Embellisher, My Block Piecer, Vintage Embroidery software, My Lace Maker, Patch and Applique Maker, Cut and Stitch, and Special Effects for the artwork tool. Now, I'm not going to read all of these because it'll take time, but I just wanted to leave this up here because these are the things that I'm going to be using to create that design, and you can kind of see which program it's in. The split design tool is only in our Perfect Embroidery Pro, but I do have some tips for you. If you're working with a design that you can easily separate, we'll talk about that as well. And so I'll leave this up here, and then take a screenshot if you want, or of course you can review this video as many times as you want. And I will come back to this list after we create, because some of this stuff I think will make a little more sense after you see it in action. So I'm going to try to make sure I do that each time we do a software success. I think that will help all of you understanding, your features, because it's just as confusing for me as it is for you, which software does what feature. So, all right. So I'm going to, I was playing around before, so I'm going to go back into just like my Perfect Embroidery Pro screen. And this is the one I use the most, even if I'm using features from other software, because I have most of the icons on the screen. I usually do Perfect Embroidery Pro or either my embroidery tool shed as the default. And we've talked about that before. And so let's create our little watermelon design first. So I'm going to work with my artwork tools and give you some tips for using these, because they're fantastic if you want to create shapes to add to existing embroidery designs or whatever. So the drop down arrow on the right hand side of this artwork tool here gives me a list of options of things that I can make just by clicking and dragging. So we're going to be using the ellipse. Now, the ellipse, if I click and drag, I can make an oval. But if I hold down my control key and click and drag, I get a perfect circle. Okay, so that's what we're going to be using today. So I'm going to do the undo. Everybody has an undo key, and I use it a lot. So I'm going to hold down my control key, and I'm going to click and drag on the screen. And because my control key on my keyboard is depressed, I get a perfect circle. Okay, there's other ways to make a perfect circle, but that to me is the easiest one. And I was kind of making this design to really kind of fit in my 4x4 hoop. You could make it whatever size you want, but I'm going to make my circle, say a 3.85. You guys know your 4x4 hoop really only stitches 3.9. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of leeway there. So I've got my circle. Now today I have my grid turned on, and I was using that earlier. And a lot of times when I'm demonstrating to all of you guys, I turn it off to me, I feel like it's a distraction on the screen, but we're gonna turn it on and use it today a little bit later. So I'll show you that as well. But it just helps with some alignment if you need to make things exactly the right size sometimes. So, okay, so I've got my circle. So I'm going to choose my shape tool, and my shape tool is going to allow me to split this circle in half. Now, not every software has the shape tool. So if you don't have that, you could just draw with your artwork tool a half circle with the pen tool. Okay. So I'm going to do a right mouse click right on top of that node and say split line. And then I'm going to choose this one exactly across, right mouse click, split line. And now you can see that the top half is highlighted. If I go back to my select tool, I can now select my two halves separately. Okay, so I'm going to mirror image the first half there, and I'm going to make this one the inside or the meat of my watermelon, the flesh of my watermelon. So I'm going to make this one, let's just try a 3.6 in size, and I have my maintain aspect ratio selected. So my half circle is a little bit smaller than this one. The next thing I want to do is I want to fill these in so that we can see the artwork better and see what's happening. Now, you don't have to do this step, but visually, I think it makes more sense to show you what I'm doing. So over here in my artwork properties, if you've got the artwork tool, you should be able to change it to a fill, and I click apply. And now this is the interior of my watermelon, and this is the exterior. So I'm going to make that green. And then for this one, I'm going to make it yellow. Has anybody out there ever eaten a yellow fleshed watermelon or yellow meated watermelon? I'm originally from Alabama and we love yellow meated watermelon. So I'm going to make mine yellow just to throw you guys off. So, and so now I've got my two half circles. So I'm going to use my alignment tools here to line these up. Now, if I do center, it centers everything together, and I want it to be where the top part is aligned. And now you cannot see my yellow because it's in the background. And I can tell that over in my sequence view here. It's the first thing, and then the green is over top of it. Well, you can do a couple of things. I can click my yellow and drag it and drop it on top of my green, and it'll bring that forward. I'm going to undo. Or I could have used this icon that says bring to the front. Okay, so if you've got a long list of objects, it's easy to click bring to the front. Okay, so now I'm going to select everything again. Now, I didn't want it to be completely centered. What I really wanted was it to be top aligned and then centered horizontally here. And so I can use those two separately. I just wanted to show you what that center does. So now I've got the meat of my watermelon, and I have the rind. Now, if you were going to turn this into embroidery, I would not want stitches underneath the meat of the watermelon. So this is just artwork. Remember, we have no stitches at this point. If I select everything, under my right mouse click, I have shaping tools. Now, this shaping tool is not in every software, but it's the trim tool. And the trim tool allows me to trim what's underneath the yellow. So now I only have these two separate pieces. Okay. So now, if you do not have the trim tool, what could you do? You could have drawn this green rind completely separate. Don't make it a half circle, literally draw this skinny half circle on the screen, and then draw the half circle of the meat of the watermelon. So you don't have to have the trim tool. You could do these manually. Okay. So that's an option if you don't have that in your software, but you do have the artwork tool. Now, I am going to turn that into stitches. So let's convert this to a complex fill. So the yellow part. Now I could make it an applique or I could do a decorative fill, but I'm going to use a complex fill for this one. And we're going to do our text coming up here in just a bit. But I just wanted to show you how to create this in case you're using a software that doesn't have the text. And then I'm going to select the green part, and I'm going to turn that one into a satin stitch. Okay. Now we've got satin stitch and we've got still stitch, which people use those terms interchangeably, but they're actually not. And I'll show you why. So let me choose my artwork tool, and we're going to make some seeds for our watermelon. So I'm going to use the leaf shape conveniently, that's very similar to a seed shape, right? So I click to create that. And let's talk about the difference between a steel stitch and a satin stitch. Okay, so if I choose satin stitch for this seed, you can see that it fills it, and that's a satin stitch that's going to go side by side. It's got a little bit of split there. That's what that color difference is. Let me make it a lighter color, and I think you can see it. So that area right there that kind of looks strange, that means the stitches are too wide for my machine to stitch. So the software split them, so it's going to stitch side by side to side, side to side, side to side. When it gets here, it's going to stitch from this side in to the other side, and then it's going to come in and stitch in the middle again, but it kind of does it in random spots, so it kind of blends your stitches together. Okay. And then I'm going to choose this same shape, and I'm just going to copy it and paste it, and then I'm going to make that the steel stitch. Okay. So satin stitch. So this, people call this a satin stitch, which I mean it does have that satin effect, but in our software, we call them two different things. So the satin stitch can have varying widths. You can see how my satin stitch is narrow at the top, it gets wider, and then it gets narrow at the bottom of my seed. A steel stitch is a satin stitch of the same width everywhere. So you can see that as it goes around my shape, it is the same width all the way around. Okay, so that's the difference in the two stitches. The satin stitch can be varying widths, and the steel stitch is the same width everywhere. Okay, so now we want our seeds to look like this, right? Now watch when I make this smaller, because this is a little big for my my watermelon. So when I make it smaller, you'll see that it's not splitting that satin anymore, because it is of the size that can be stitched on the embroidery machine. Okay, so I'm going to make that a little bit smaller, and we'll make it black for our watermelon. And now I already know that I want to flip this around, but I'm going to show you the circle tool or the carousel tool here. And I want my seeds to be the opposite of what it's going to do. And so, but I want to show you first. Now the seeds are kind of facing down in this carousel tool. So if I mirror image it, and then just go back to the carousel tool, you can see they're the right way. Now, not everybody has the carousel tool, but if you do, it's an easy way to make a bunch of copies of your seeds. We're just going to delete the ones we don't need. I'm going to make maybe a few more here. And if you don't have the carousel tool, you can just copy and paste your seed and place it where you want it. Use your alignment tool. So I'm going to say, okay. And then while that is still grouped together, I'm going to select everything and align that to be center. Whoops, wrong thing. Let me select just my seeds, and I want to move them up so that they are in a, kind of this area of my watermelon. And then now I'll select everything again, and I'm going to use my horizontal align, and it'll just make sure everything's lined up. So pretty easy, right? But we don't need those seeds on the top. So I'm just going to ungroup wherever that is right here and just select those seeds on the top, and then just press the delete on your keyboard, or delete is also under your right mouse click menu. And maybe I don't want these two. This one's really close to the edge, and so is this one. So, and look at that. You've got a cute little design, right? Okay, so I'm going to change this part into text, and we're going to manipulate the text to fit the rind of our watermelon. But before we do that, let's just add some text, and then we'll take a break and answer some questions. So our text tool. So if I click my text tool and I click on the screen one time, it will place the letter on the screen that letter A of the last font that I used. And I'm just going to put summer and click apply. And let's change the color to maybe pink, since we didn't use pink for the watermelon. And I can put that right over top. And whoop, I accidentally clicked with my text tool still selected. You can see how the A is on my tool. That means my text tool is still selected, so I can enter more text if I want, but I didn't mean to do that, accidental. So I'm going to do an undo and go back to my select tool. If I select everything, I can just use my horizontal alignment to make sure that I'm centered. But look at the mess it made. Okay, this is another question that we get, and I do this from time to time too. Do your undo if you make a mess. And my seeds, they are now separated. So let me group those back together so they act as one object. So now when I select everything and select that alignment, it's not going to put all my seeds in the center. So cute, right? Okay, now of course, I just did this. You could make that an applique. You could do so many different things with that. I'm absolutely sure. And then, so let's answer some questions. And whenever we get done with our questions, I'm going to show you how to shape the text to fit into the watermelon rind there. And we'll use a couple of different types of text. So let's see if we have any questions. And I see that there are a couple already. So Sandy, thank you for being here, Sandy. She says, do you have to change the push-pull compensation? So when you select or when you create a design in any of the Dime software, it has kind of a generic push pull already applied, but certainly depending on which fabric you're stitching on, you definitely might want to do that. Now, because my watermelon does not overlap my rind very much, if I was stitching on something that was stretchy, it probably would have a gap there, and it might even be off to one side because of the fill stitches. And I could compensate for that in a couple of different ways. We actually have some built-in settings that you can automatically choose, and I'll show you those. But certainly if you're stitching on something that has a lot of stretch to it, then absolutely you probably want to adjust that, or overlap them more is a good way to compensate for that as well. So just looking through, oh my gosh, doesn't look like you guys have any questions. That must have been like spot on. And I don't see any more questions up there. So yeah, so it looks good. So I just see the one from Sandy. So thank you, Sandy, for asking that question. So then let's just go right back over there and I'll answer that part live. So here you can see if I hide my watermelon, we don't have any overlap here. And so if you're stitching on something stretchy, you might find a gap there. So you could make this overlap by either adjusting your points if you don't have push pull in your particular program. You can see that with my shape tool, I can make sure I've got a little bit of overlap here between the stitches, and that's going to help with that. And you definitely see that when you have like I said, stretchy fabric. And then I would bring my green to the front of the yellow so that the fill stitch is underneath. So also in Perfect Embroidery Pro, over here in your properties, you have the option to change the pull and the push right here in this setting. It looks like a little squiggly stitch there. And you can increase that to whatever it is that you want. Of course, when you're learning this, the best thing to do is test on the fabric that you're going to stitch this on and then make adjustments based on what you see in your test stitch. We know stretchy fabric moves a lot. It stretches a lot, it pushes a lot, and so it's definitely going to need some adjustment. Another way to compensate for that easily is under the click to stitch option. So click to stitch is in Perfect Embroidery Pro and Embroidery Tool Shed Plus, and maybe in My Quilt Embellisher. I didn't put that one in my list. I apologize. But click to stitch, what it does is it allows you to select the fabric that you're stitching on. So let's say you are going to stitch it on a knit t-shirt for this particular design, and it's going to adjust the density, the underlay, and the pull compensation for a knit. And these are predetermined settings. So this is really a starting point. So when you say yes, it makes the adjustment. And then whenever you click next, it recommends a type of stabilizer and any special tips that it can give you on knits. Okay. So what it has done is it's adjusted that based on the type of fabric we chose. To me, that is a good place to start, but it doesn't always mean it's going to be 100%. You cannot I can't say enough about testing. We don't always like to test, but when you're creating your own designs, it's really important to test on fabric very close to what you're stitching on the final design to see how it's going to behave. And then you can make adjustments to compensate for the type of fabric. So, but really easy, right? And so the click to stitch is just a really easy way to take care of those things that as hobby creators or part-time digitizers or every now and then digitizers, we don't always perfect all of those things. So it's nice to have tools built in your software that can really help steer you in the right direction is really what that's doing. So, so on this, so let's do our watermelon again, and I will create that circle. We'll do that circle again. That's really quick and easy. But in this time, we're just going to do our rind and we're going to get rid of the watermelon shape. So I did mine, remember, like the 3.85 for my circle. I click and drag with my control key depressed. And then I'm going to right mouse click with my shape tool. So let's select our shape tool, which is the second arrow down on my layout, and right mouse click, and then I can say split line. So right now this is one continuous artwork. By choosing split line, it is separating at that point that I say split. So now I've got my two halves, and I am going to mirror image that top one, and we're going to make that a little bit smaller. And for this time, I'm going to make it much smaller because I'm going to do that as a fill stitch here. And so let's do both of our shapes. Remember, I'm going to do the artwork and the complex fill. I'm going a little faster here because we already saw that part. And so now let's make our two different colors. This one we'll do our pink watermelon. And I'm going to select everything. Remember, we're going to top align and horizontal center. And then I'm going to bring my pink to the front. Okay. And this is a little bit wider, but I think I wanted a little bit more. And I'll show you why, because I'm going to show you one more tip on the artwork tool. So let's make this part. Let's try 3.4. And this is how I design. I try my setting. If I don't love it, then I'll make the adjustments until I get what I know. I don't always know those numbers by heart. So, and then let's do top align again, just make sure that we're centered. And now I'm going to do the trim again. So I'm going to select everything, right mouse click, trim, so that I can just have my watermelon rind here. Now for this one, instead of the satin stitch, I'm going to turn that into a complex fill. So I've got convert to, I'm going to do a right mouse click, convert to a complex fill, or you could use your effects panel, or if your complex fill icon is on your toolbar, you can do it up there as well. But the reason I did this is because I'm going to add a satin stitch or a steel stitch that is a little bit of an accent. So I've got a two-tone watermelon rind. Okay. So now if you do not have the ability to do the trim, and you need to, or the shape tool, and you need to draw a half circle, let me show you how to do that easily with the pen tool. So now I can use my shape here as a guide, and I'm going to do a right mouse click on my tool, on my ruler bar, and say center origin, and that'll just center everything up for me. And then I'm going to choose my pen tool. My pen tool will allow me to click. I'm going to hold down my control key and I'm going to click really quickly. But if you don't have the shape tool, you can manually draw this shape just by clicking on with your pen tool. Okay. But you can see that my shape's not beautiful. So I'm going to show you how to make that a little more perfect with your pen tool. So the drop down menu and our pen tool, and I'm going to click only 3 times to make that arc, but I'm going to press the A, as in the letter A for apple, on my keyboard. So watch what happens when I do this. So here's my regular pen tool. When I press the A on my keyboard, A as in apple, you can see I get that little arc beside it. That's what the A stands for, is to make a perfect arc. So now I can click on one end, the middle, and the opposite end, and it'll make a perfect arc for me. So I'm going to overlap just a smidge with my clicks here. So I'm going to click one time here. I'm going to go to the bottom center, and that's what my grid is helping me find the center of my watermelon here. Click again. You can see it's one straight line there. And then I'm going to click the outside and just overlapped a smidge, and look at what it did. So now that I'm done, I'm going to press my enter on my keyboard. Let's hide the green. Look at that perfect arc that it made. Okay. So that is your, whoops, I need that to stay there. I'm going to do redo that and then put my green back. So now for my artwork, I'm going to make it this darker green, and let's turn that into our steel stitch. So over here in my effects panel, I can just click on steel, or I could do a right mouse click and click on steel. And that makes me a two-tone watermelon rind. Okay. So now let's, after we did that, and we've got this overlapping a little bit, so I wouldn't adjust my push pull for this particular instant unless I tested and it needed a little bit more. But let's do our artwork tool, or our artwork text for the center here, and manipulate that. Now, some of you guys may have built-in text, and some of you might have TrueType font option in your software, and some of you might have both. Okay, so I'm going to show you both. They do manipulate the same way. Let's first start with our satin text. That's a built-in text. So I'm going to click the T for my text tool, and then click one time on the screen, and let's enter our text. I'm going to enter my summer and click apply. Now I chose Cooper font because it's kind of bulky, it's thick, it's juicy, like my watermelon, right? And then I've got my text on the screen. So now we've gone over this before, but let me reiterate this. Look at all these shapes that are around my text. Okay, if I click my select tool, they go away. I only have the normal shapes around the corner. If I go back to my text tool, even though I'm not going to enter new text, you can see that it selected my text, and I have these shapes back on the screen. Okay. And that's what we want for what we're about to do. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my select tool. Let's do a right mouse click on my color pink for my summer. And then we'll manipulate this on the screen. Okay. Before we do that, I did see a couple of questions pop up, and I don't want to get too far so that they maybe relate to what we are talking about. So good question, Harriet Ann Palmer. She said, explain push pull. So when you are embroidering, you have probably seen this and just not realized this is what it's called, but our embroidery stitches push, fill stitches particularly, they push our fabric in the direction that the fill stitches. So let's say that you have a perfect circle that you created, and you stitch it, and it's a fill stitch, and you stitch it on a very stretchy fabric. The stitches that are stitching in the fill stitch, which are usually like a 45 angle, they're going to distort the shape of your oval because your fabric is stretching. So it's actually going to stitch more oval-like instead of a perfect circle, because the fabric and the stitches are pushing against the fabric. Where our satin stitches tend to pull because, you know, they stitch side to side, and we've got our bobbin underneath, and it's pulling against those stitches. And so it, you know, will pull your fabric together on those stitches. So when you are stitching on a fabric that has the stretch on it, if you increase your pull compensation, it will basically create extra overlap in your stitches, so that if it does separate, like we talked about, the satin stitches, if they pull, then that overlap will help. And the compensation for stitching the oval is also in your push pull to make sure that it stitches more like a circle. So it's something that, you know, would probably take years to master of digitizing and testing. That's why I say it's a good thing to start with your click to stitch, and then you can always test and see what happens. That's the best way to learn, is to see what happens when you stitch something on different types of fabric that you've created and haven't put any specialty settings in. And then that kind of gives you, you know, that basic knowledge of what's going on with the stitches. I can say that there's a reason that we pay good money for digitized designs from well-known digitizers that have been doing it for years, because they do a great job at it, and they understand it, how to make those designs stitch out beautifully no matter what type of fabric you're stitching on. So it really is an art to creating designs. But having software, you certainly can learn more, build more, get better, and then use your built-in features to help make that learning process, maybe the learning curve, not as steep. So, and then Jennifer Alexander says, I've never seen the click to stitch before. Could you please show where you can find it? So it's under your file menu in Perfect Embroidery Pro, and Embroidery Toolshed Plus are the two that I know off the top of my head have it. I should have looked that up before, completely forgot to look that one up, but I'll definitely do it for you next time. So click to stitch, and I would use click to stitch with a design that you created. Do not bring in a design that a well-known, very good master digitizer created and apply those settings, because it would basically just take their design and apply more underlay and push pull, but they've already figured all that out. So really, I use click to stitch whenever I'm creating a design in my software, or if the digitizer is maybe somebody that didn't is just learning to gave you the design, I guess you could apply to their design as well. But really, it's for when we're creating in our dime software. So really good question, under your file menu for that, Jennifer. And then Sherry says, can you change the angle of the fill on the border? You absolutely can. I'll show you that when I go back over there. So angle on the fill, I'll show you that. And then, hey, Barbara, thanks for joining. So good to see you. So she said, can you delete the double stitches on your green? Yes, I'm thinking that you meaning my I think you're meaning the overlapping, Barbara. You certainly could, but you don't always want to, because of what we were just talking about with the pull compensation. Because if you delete them in this case, you might see a separation between the dark green border and the light green. And I will tell you, stitching satin stitches on top of fill stitches, it's not really a problem, because your satin stitches go side to side and they're going to kind of go in between your fill stitches. But I just wouldn't want a lot of them. But in this case, it's just over the edge, and it should be uh, perfectly fine. But again, test and see if you like it. So, and then Belinda says, can you go over one more time the split line? Absolutely. When I go back over there, Belinda, I'll do split line for you as well. That's using your shape tool. So you have to make sure you have the shape tool in your software. So really good question. So, and then can you make green part use puffy foam or foam, Laura says. So yes, you can. The foam needs to go under satin stitches. If you put foam under a fill stitch, then it will just compress it, and it really wouldn't have the effect you're going for. So you want to put foam under satin stitches or a steel stitch, or under an applique edge that's a satin edge, because the foam fills in those satin stitches and makes them puff up or raised. And so for foam, I would, there's a couple of things that I would do for that, and I'll talk about that when I go back over there, because you do want to make sure you keep your stitches enclosed in those satin stitches. So, and it says, do you need to change the density or needle when embroidering over a fill stitch? No. If you look at a design that's created by a well-known digitizer that you know does really well, there's always a little bit of overlap, and sometimes it's overlapping fill stitches, sometimes it's overlapping satin on fill. But no, you do not have to change your needle or the density or anything. In this case, we're just doing just the regular normal density and the regular density on the satin stitch. And I've stitched things that I've created at these densities and not changed and not had any issues. However, that's a personal preference. If you stitch it and you don't like it, you certainly can adjust the fill density and the satin density as well. So really good question. So, okay, so let's go over, I'll answer those questions from Sherry and Belinda before I forget. If I go too much further ahead, I'll forget what I was supposed to answer. So Sherry says to change the angle on the fill. So let's go let's go back over to our first watermelon. We're going to do our text here in a minute. So our summer watermelon here, let's change it on here because I think it'll be more visible than just that skinny strip. Okay, so if I select my fill stitch and click on my shape tool, And actually, let's make my watermelon the pink color over here so we can see our line. So when I click on the shape tool, there's a yellow line that is telling me the angle of my stitches. You could turn off your 3D over here, your realistic view, and you can see it a little bit better. And so when I move that, right now my fill stitches are stitching at, kind of a 45-ish or whatever that angle was. If you want it to stitch a different direction, you just change the angle of that line. Right now I'm at 89 degrees. And when I release it, now my fill stitches will follow along that line. And you'll see it when I turn this back on. And so now that I've changed the angle, I'm going to press the enter key on my keyboard, and you can see that shift to that new angle. So now my stitches are running up and down rather than at that angle. So yes, you can change the angle on your fill stitches if you like. And that's important when you have a lot of fill stitches on your design or in your design. It's a good idea to put them at different angles to make it stitch out well. So, okay. And then Belinda's question was the split line one more time. So if I go back to a blank page, and I'll just use my circle example. So click and drag your circle. It's the shape tool that you want to use. The shape tool exposes the nodes for the shape. And then I can right mouse click right on top of it and choose split line. Right mouse click over here and split line, and it split those in half. Now I'm going to do an undo key and undo one more time where nothing is split. If you only split on one node, it still is splitting it, but it's not just separating my whole half. So now here I have my two nodes separately there. So if you split it, that's what it's doing, is creating a break rather than having one solid line there. So really good question. So I love that. Okay, so let's make our text shape like our watermelon here, and we'll talk about TrueType fonts as well. So now remember, to get the little shapes around your text that we're about to use, you want to have your text tool selected, and that gives me different editing features than I have when just my select tool is selected. Okay, so on the end here, I'm going to click and drag that double triangle to make this fit within my watermelon rind here. And actually I'm going to bring it down because it's the top that I really want to make sure I have that good fit on, like that. And then all I did was take this bottom and drag that down to fill in my watermelon shape. Now, if you need to move it, adjust it, make it maybe a smidge smaller, you can do that so you don't have like a ton of that overlap here. But look what it did to my satin stitches. They don't look gorgeous anymore because of the stretching of the design. And this is why I also wanted to show you TrueType text, because you might not like the way it looks. If it does not look great on the screen, chances are it's not going to stitch out great, but sometimes it may look great on the screen and it's still not stitch out great based on the fabric you're using. But I really think that this does not do this text justice. Okay. And so I wound up using my TrueType text. So TrueType text are those texts that live on your computer. Our software can see them. Some of our programs use them primarily, but they are not the same as the built-in text. So I'm going to do my unkey and go back to my regular shape here before I edited this. And this font here and any of the built-in fonts into any Dime software, those fonts have been digitized by a digitizer, a master digitizer, so they stitch out beautifully. Okay. When you take a TrueType font from your font list here, when I check this TT, and this list right here, these are the TrueType fonts that live on my computer. And what the software is doing is it's automatically just it's almost like an auto digitizer. Well, not like one, it really is. It's an auto digitizer. It's taking a TrueType font, and that is an artwork, and it's basically adding stitches at best it can. But look what happens. So here, my M right here and right here, those two areas, I don't really love how that is created. So I'm telling you this because not every TrueType font is created equally. It may look great It may not. Now, if you do have the ability built into the software with your tools, you can make edits to these when we not ungroup, when we break up our text. And I'll show you that coming up here in just a moment. Okay. And I'll show you how you can make those edits. But I also have the ability to choose artwork for my TrueType fonts. Artwork means there's no stitches. It's just the letter shapes. And by choosing the artwork shape, I can then apply my fill stitches if I want fill stitches rather than a satin stitch text. And I'm going to use the fill for this example because the letters are going to be really fat. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to my option here. So right now it's on satin. And let's do breakup text and then I'll undo it. So breakup text, let's go over here to our sequence view. You can see here that my object type is text. That means that I've used my text tool to create it. When it's text object and I save my C2S file, I can easily go back in here. It remembers all of the settings that I have set for text, and it also remembers the font style that I have set. So I can easily just overwrite this text and say something else. Okay. So that's text type. Now look at those letters. Every one of those in the TrueType fonts actually look good, even though the M, the uppercase M, I didn't think did really great. But that one did. So that's what I mean. Not every TrueType font is going to come out perfectly every time because it's really an auto digitizing thing that's happening. Okay, so now this is of type text. Okay, I'm going to undo and go back to summer, and then I'm going to right mouse click and say break up text, and watch what happens. Now my S, U, M, M, E, R are all separate objects. These are now separate designs when I break them up. I can no longer go back to my text object and change anything, my font style, re-enter my letters, because it's no longer a text object. So here, though, this actually, because it's just a regular satin object, which is what type of stitching that is, I have the ability to make changes to this text. So now for this letter that doesn't stitch very well, I'm going to turn off my 3D view. You can see that I've selected my shape tool. And there's actually two lines right here. There's an angle line and there's a split line. So the split line is splitting this letter in right here, and it's starting over in the stitches. So really what it should be doing is splitting right here. This is why not every text, TrueType text, is going to come out perfect every time. So now my split is here, and I'm just going to adjust my angle line so that looks much better. So let me turn that. So now that looks like a normal letter, right? Okay, so if you didn't know how to do that, then you might not know what even to do to correct it. So you could just change to a different type of font or use a built-in font, because those are digitized already to look gorgeous. Okay, so now let me go back. I'm going to do text again and put in our summer. And for this one, we're going to go to artwork and break up the text. Okay, so I'm going to say apply. I'm going to choose TrueType, and then instead of satin, I want this one to be artwork, and I click apply. And I actually use this Cooper Black because, again, it's a thick font, nice and juicy, perfect for my watermelon. Okay, so now let's do a right mouse click, turn it pink, just because I like that. And I'm going to resize this to make it fit. Now, when you're resizing artwork, it really doesn't matter because it's, it's not stitches yet. It's just the artwork shape. So resizing it when it's artwork, you can really manipulate it and do whatever you want. And then I'm going to click and drag that to go down curved with my watermelon there. And now from my select tool, right now this is still text object, okay? But I want to make this a fill stitch, so I need to break it up. I'm going to do a right mouse click. Or actually, I think I can just select it. Let's try it. Yeah, I can just turn it into the fill. I didn't have to even break it up. So if I do the undo, I'm back to the artwork. My fill object here or my fill type is under my effects, or I could do a right mouse click and say convert to complex fill. Okay. So now I've got those satin stitches or the fill stitches there. And the reason I did fill is because some of these areas were too wide for our satin stitches, just like we saw when we used our regular text. And then I just did my seeds again. And now I'll show you one more tip on the seeds before we answer some more questions. So I'm just going to draw my little seed again and select that. I'm going to make that a satin stitch and make it black like seeds, maybe make it a smidge smaller. And now put that over my letters. Again, this is a satin stitch stitching over a fill stitch, and this is very small. It's minor. I would not remove the stitches underneath. If you do, you might see some gapping. If you want to remove the stitches, if you select the object on top, right mouse click, under utility, remove overlap. Remove overlap is a PEP only feature. I can't say that enough. Remove overlap is a PEP only feature. So when I click remove overlap and I slide my seed out of the way, you can see that it made a hole. Again, you may see a little bit of gapping in there. So I actually wouldn't even cut a hole for these seeds. That's just me personally. Test it. If you don't love it, you always can go back and remove the stitches underneath. Okay. So now I'm going to right mouse click, and instead of copying and pasting, I'm going to choose duplicate. Duplicate lets me just click wherever I want the next seed to be. Whoops. I'm going to do an undo. And I can just drop these in different places on my letters to make these cute little seeds everywhere. Isn't that adorable? And so that is right mouse click and duplicate, and it's going to put your same thing that you have selected. When you click, it just drops one of those shapes. Now, these are all of our jump stitches here, so it's going to jump. Here's an easy way to add a trim. I don't know why this did not add the trim in there. Sometimes it does kind of some crazy things to me too. But to quickly add a trim, down here in the bottom right-hand corner, if you have Perfect Embroidery Pro, you can add trims wherever you want them. So if I select this last seed and I click trim, it's going to trim at that previous object. And I can do the same thing here, click trim, and you can see that it pulls, it's going to stop and trim and then jump and not do my jump stitch. So you can do that as well. But that's how you can create that cute little design. And then above it, I just added some more text here, and use, built-in text if you want. Use your TrueType font as satin text. I'll maybe just use not a little brush. Maybe do just a regular brush text here and make that larger. So maybe make it a 0.8, click apply and see what that gives us. And I think that's pretty cute, right? What do you think? And then I'm going to turn my commands off because you can see those little scissors everywhere. And I don't always love to see them, but that's what this button does. It shows you where there's a trim, where there's a color change, things like that. So isn't that adorable? What do you guys think? All right, so let's see if we have any questions before, and I'm going to go back to that same screen so you can see which features that I used and were in which software again. So Rosemary says, when I got my PEP software, I was told that I always had to first save as click to stitch first, then save as PES. Do I not have to do that every time? I would not do click to stitch unless you created the design and it's the final design before you are taking it to your embroidery machine. I do all of my designing and then I would save it as a C2S file. And then you could apply your click to stitch settings and then save it as your PES file if you want. But I don't do that every time I save. I really do that if I need to before my final save that's going to my embroidery machine. So really good question, Rosemary. And then Barbara says, can you delete the double green? So Barbara, I think I answered that. I think you were talking about the overlapping stitches. If that's not correct, then tell me tell me if I need to show you something different. And then Gail says, do you need to change the density? Oh, we already saw that. So, oh my goodness, you guys didn't have many questions today. So let me just scroll down and see what other ones I was trying to get back. So what is the icon between the stitch ends and the grid? So between the stitch ends and the grid. So that one is your stitches tool to toggle them on or off. So if we can share my screen again, I'll show you that, Kathy. So the stitch ends, you can see all those little black dots. That shows you every point at which your needle is going to penetrate the fabric. Let me turn off the 3D. All those black dots, those are the stitch ends. That's every single place the needle is going to penetrate the fabric. This one here, it's just the stitches toggle on or off. And so this right here is what we call a wire frame. That's kind of what the software uses to resize. Whenever you resize a design, this wire frame, it is filling it with stitches or removing stitches away. And so that's kind of what you're seeing there without the stitches turned on. So hopefully that makes sense there, Kathy. She says, never mind. She changed her default to PEP. So she figured it out all on her own. So and then Belinda says, if you want the shape or the text to an irregular shape like a heart, how do you shape it? So depending on what software you have, Belinda, you could do kind of similar to what I did here, but you might have to trim some off the top. And by trim, I mean what we did with the trim tool, where we cut out the center of the watermelon from the rind. You might have to trim those top pieces there to make your text fit into a heart shape. If you have a cut and stitch, it has like the knockout tool, which does something like that automatically. So play around with that if you have it too. So, and then Sandy says, I got lost on the text object. So Sandy, basically, if it says it's a text object, that means that it's, you can go back and change your font style. You can go back and, change your letters. Like if you misspell a word, it's easy. But once you break up text, every letter is a separate object. It's no longer a group. It's no longer a word. I guess that maybe that's a good way to describe it. When it's a text object, it's a word or whatever you typed in. When you break it up, it's just a bunch of letters. And even though they make a word, but it's still just a bunch of letters to the software. So hopefully that helps there. And then Sandra says, so under cut and stitch, can you do the same thing by removing the background under the seats? No, the remove overlap feature is only in Perfect Embroidery Pro. If you want to not have stitching behind the seeds in cut and stitch, since cut and stitch uses artwork for nearly everything in that software as the basis, then you could do the trim where it cuts out the hole behind the seed. And then when you turn that into stitches, it won't have the stitches behind it. So do the trim first before you cut it to stitches is kind of a little bit of a way around that. So, and then Amy says she kind of likes the seed holes in the word. Yeah, absolutely. And it does make a neat design effect. And if you had like a dark fabric, really that would show up as the seed and it would be less stitches. So very good point, Amy. I love that. And then Barbara says, how do you get the icons to show on the bottom right? I have a Mac. So Barbara, I can't remember which software you have, but the icons on the bottom right are because I have Perfect Embroidery Pro. And so if you don't have Perfect Embroidery Pro, that might be why. But they should even show up there in the Mac, because I do use a Mac from time to time, and they should be there if you have Perfect Embroidery Pro. Make sure Perfect Embroidery Pro is your default, and that should help. So, and then is trim a PEP only function? Actually, no. Trim is in cut and stitch as well. And also, I did list that one on my list. I thought I did. Complex fill, artwork tool. I did not. Shaping tool, trim. Yes. Okay. I did make that on my list. Thank you, Amy. And so trim is in PEP, cut and stitch, and special effects. So, so that's where you can easily find the trim tool. So very good question. So, and then Sherry says, you're covering so much. I really appreciate that education you give. I'll need to rewatch. And I do know that's the case. I know that these are a lot of information, but that's the beauty of being able to rewatch. Like you said, Sherry, I do agree. Rewatch it as many times as you want. Follow along in your software to create if you are trying to create this design and you don't have all of the tools that I've shown, post on our Facebook user group. Ask over there, is there a way that I can do this? Ashley showed this in Software Success. I'm trying to figure it out. I have blah, 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 blah. Tell us what software you have when you're asking questions on our user group. That lets us know which features you have, and we can help you get your design done based on the features that you have in your programs. And then Susan said, can you save text or design as an SVG? Yes, you can. You can do that in our Perfect Embroidery Pro, Word, or not Word Art and Stitches, Perfect Embroidery Pro, My Quilt Embellisher, Cut and Stitch, and I'm trying to think, the Patch and Applique Maker. You could probably do it because it has the cutter tool. In Pam, and I think that's probably it for the ones that'll save as an SVG. So really good question. That's a nice way to get a cut file for your digital cutter. So, and then Arlene says, would you please show how to connect my Baby Lock to Wi-Fi, as also can Wi-Fi go to Embroidery 6 needle machines? Yes. So Baby Lock and Brother wireless capable, Arlene. So it has to be a wireless capable machine. So I'm not sure which model you have, but if you can't connect, it may be that it doesn't have the capabilities. So you have to know if it has the capability. And some 6 and 10 needles do have capabilities, and some of the Brother and Baby Lock flatbed machines also have that. In your software, whenever you go over, I'll go back to my software really quick before we sign off. Under the send to machine option here, the little icon, this is actually in every Dime software that is paid. So you can send wirelessly to any Brother or Baby Lock wireless capable embroidery machine from any Dime software other than our free embroidery tool shed. And so what you're going to do is, there's probably one right here that says My Machine, and you can actually click it and say edit, or you can click new and then do this search option, and it will search any machines on your network. So here's the thing. Right now, it doesn't have any because both of my embroidery machines that I can connect to wireless are off. You have to have the embroidery machine turned on, and it has to be, the machine itself must be connected to your Wi-Fi network. When you click the search icon, it'll give you a list, and then you can click on whichever one. It'll say Brother or Baby Lock beside it. You can give it a name, call it My Machine or whatever you want. And then when you say okay, it'll have it here. And so to send this design to my machine, I just select which machine and then click send, and it will do it automatically. But the machine has to be on. And if you have any other issues with that, go over on our YouTube, or not YouTube, our Facebook user group called Dime Inspiration Software Users. I've posted detailed instructions over there, and there's also instructions in some of our manuals. Our user manuals are being updated, so all of that information will be in all of them soon. And so, but right now it's not in every one. So Belinda says, how do you change the stitch text to artwork? So it depends on which program you have, Belinda. But if you're using the text tool and you're using your TrueType text, in your drop down list in your properties over here, if I choose my text object over here, there's a TT. If I click the TT, that's my TrueType font list. To change it to artwork, I would click artwork and click apply. Okay, so that's the easiest way to do that if you have that. Just looking for any last questions. Oh, Laura, the foam. Thank you for reminding me. Let me go back over and I'll show that really quickly. So Laura asked about this green stitching here being foam. If you want to digitize for 3D foam, you have to have what we call an end cap. In this instance here, our stitches go side to side, and so your foam would be sticking out the end. So you need to digitize a little satin stitch here to enclose the foam, and that would stitch first. And then I would increase my density. So decrease the density of your steel stitch to maybe like a 0.2 over here in my settings. Click apply, and you can see how it tightened it up there. And that's really the main things for digitizing for foam, but you definitely have to have an end cap, and I'll show you what I mean on, let me show you a foam font here. So, and that the foam font's just the easiest way to show it. So I'll select that from my list. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here and grab a foam font, this one. And I'm going to turn off my 3D. Do you see those dark areas there? That is what we call end caps. If we watch this stitch out, that's just the satin stitch placement guide around the outside. But watch this. You see how those stitch first? And all you have to do is make a little a line and a little still stitch, but it will enclose the ends of your foam. So if I go back over to our zoomed in, so that would enclose the foam so it's not sticking out the end of your still stitch there. Thank you for re-asking, Laura. I forgot that as I went over to the other side. So, and then CJ says, what can I find the icons belongs to which pack, like Pro? And so the list, the comparison we're working on, CJ. So hopefully that'll be something that we release so that everybody can see that soon. So, but right now, you know, I have an idea of that and I've got a rough list, but we're going to make it pretty so that it's understandable for everybody. And we'll put it on our site so everybody can get to it. So, and then the last question I'll answer here. So Amy says, if you have SFX, could you change that to foam? Yes, you can. The SFX software, which I'm going to be going over in August, and I'm also going to be on our Thursday Facebook Live talking about it on July I think it's the 18th, if that's a Thursday. Yes. So July 18th, I'll be on our Between Friends also talking about special effects. But yes, if you have the special effect, you just select that still stitch, Amy, click foam, and it does those end caps for you, and it sets all the density and the underlay and everything that you need. So really good question. And then Rachel says, I have the original embroidery tool shed. How do I get, and do I need the embroidery tool shed plus? So embroidery tool shed plus adds a few extra features to the free one, like text and being able to group and ungroup. So Rachel, go back to past software success, and I've done one on embroidery tool shed plus, so you can watch and see all the capabilities and kind of make a decision if it has something that you really would find useful in your designing. So it's a really good question. Okay, so last time here, so the tools and features that I use, this is the list here today. I forgot the click to stitch, so sorry. And that gives you an idea of what software each of those are in. And then in 2 weeks, I'll be back on July 16th, and I'll do Perfect Embroidery Pro again, and I'll do another design, and we'll use some different features. And of course, I will use some features that apply to other programs. So if you don't have Perfect Embroidery Pro, then you'll learn something from your other programs as well. So so join me back here July 16th. And then this Thursday, Between Friends with Eileen Roach is off because it's a holiday. And so no Thursday Between Friends. And so then see me on Tuesday, July 16th. For Software Success right back here. And then I'll see you again July 18th for the special effects software program. So, all right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the wonderful questions. Hopefully you guys learned something today. So until we have another Software Success, I'll say bye for now. And thank you all for coming.